Hungarians in the Second World War, 1939 to 1945. In December 1941, Hungary declared war on the United States. The Italian Foreign Minister Ciano recorded an anecdote about how the Hungarian envoy in Washington delivered the declaration of war to the US State Department. The American aide inquired of the Hungarian diplomat, "Do you have any grievance with the United States?" The Hungarian diplomat replied no. "Then do you have any grievance with the United Kingdom or Russia?" "No." "Well then, with whom do you have a grievance?" "With Romania." "Then why don't you declare war on Romania?" "Because Romania is our ally." Whilst the anecdote is likely fictitious, it effectively highlights Hungary's limited foreign policy options and the geopolitical constraints faced by countries in the region at that time. The Treaty of Trianon weakened Hungary, so by the outset of World War II, it no longer had the freedom to choose its allies or enemies. So, how did Hungary become involved in World War II? Why did it become an ally of Germany? And what were the consequences of the German occupation of Hungary? An attempt at neutrality. The Versailles Peace Treaty marked the end of World War I, splitting Europe's nations into two distinct groups. The larger of the two consisted mainly of those powers who'd won the war: the United Kingdom, France, and members of the Little Entente, such as Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia. This coalition dedicated itself to preserving the Versailles settlement. The other group was composed of those nations who'd lost. They sought amendments to the peace treaty's conditions, initially keeping their objectives quiet. This soon changed as they made their position known. Along with Germany and Italy, this group included Hungary, whose main objective was recovering territories it lost to the Treaty of Trianon, or at least those with a Hungarian majority. Given that Hungary's combat resources had been restricted by military clauses in the Treaty of Trianon, peaceful means were the only realistic ones to achieving this goal. Just as the great powers had determined Hungary's fate at Trianon, Hungary now relied on the major powers' support to revise the terms of peace. It primarily sought assistance from Germany and Italy, as both were discontent and unhappy with the existing status quo. Of course, numerous issues came with German support. Hungary's political leadership, including Regent Miklós Horthy and Prime Minister Pál Teleki, were conservative patriots wary of Nazi and fascist politics and ideologies. Moreover, at the outset of the conflict in 1939 that would become World War II, they were uncertain that a German victory was even assured. In principle, they would have preferred to ally with Churchill rather than Hitler. However, the United Kingdom was geographically distant, while Germany loomed all too near. As such, it's no coincidence that by the late 1930s, not just Hungary, but the Treaty of Trianon's beneficiaries, such as Slovakia and Romania, also became allied with Germany. Initially, Hungary's leadership was resolutely against involving itself in the war. In 1938, Horthy rejected Hitler's proposal that Hungary attack Czechoslovakia. That same year, the Munich Agreement saw the UK, France, and Italy sanction the transfer of Czechoslovakia's German-inhabited territories to Germany. This reopened the issue of Hungary's wish to reclaim regions with an ethnic Hungarian majority which the Treaty of Trianon had given Czechoslovakia. Since neither party could reach an agreement, the dispute's resolution was delegated to a tribunal of German and Italian foreign ministers. The verdict they reached became known as the First Vienna Award, which saw the southern parts of Upper Hungary, which had an 85% Hungarian population, returned to Hungary from Czechoslovakia. In September 1939, Poland was invaded by Nazi Germany and Slovakia. then a few days later by the Soviet Union. With this, World War II broke out in Europe. Following the attack on Poland, Prime Minister Teleki, in agreement with Horthy, refused to allow German troops to pass through Hungarian territory. Despite Hitler's disapproval, Hungary welcomed tens of thousands of Polish refugees, including Jews, as well as many Polish soldiers who later went west to join the Allies in the fight against the Germans. All of this aside, Hungary maintained its revisionist goals, and the border dispute with Romania had both sides again requesting arbitration from Germany and Italy. The result, in August 1940, was the Second Vienna War. Northern Transylvania, as well as the ethnically Hungarian Székely land, was returned to Hungary. The Hungarian population there reacted with immense joy, and in the main square of Kolozsvár, Transylvania's unofficial capital, Miklós Horthy received an enthusiastic hero's welcome. Hungary on Germany's side. However, there was a cost to all of this. In the fall of 1940, Hungary was obliged to join the Tripartite Pact, which included Germany, Japan, and Italy. The fact that other countries in the region, including Slovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, also agreed to the pact, highlights how limited the alternatives were. Yugoslavia's fate vividly shows what could happen to a country that opposed Germany. In late March 1941, a British and Soviet-backed coup took place in Belgrade, leading to the overthrow of Yugoslavia's pro-German government. In response, Hitler invaded Yugoslavia. Hungary was unwittingly forced into the middle, as its consent was necessary to allow German troops passage through the country. Prime Minister Teleki faced two challenging and heartbreaking options. If he granted Germany access to Hungary, the nation would become embroiled in a war alongside Germany against the United Kingdom, a scenario Hungary had desperately tried to avoid. On the other hand, if Hungary rejected the request, it could result in the German occupation of Hungary and similar tragic consequences to those witnessed in Poland. Tragically, the Prime Minister found himself unable to resolve this appalling dilemma, and on April 3, 1941, in his office, he committed suicide. Teleki's successor, László Bardossy, with the approval of Horthy, allowed the German troops into the country's territory. By occupying many territories lost through the Treaty of Trianon, Bardossy succeeded in reuniting them with Hungary. After the war, Bardossy would stand before the People's Tribunal to be tried and executed for war crimes. During the trial, he outlined the predicament Hungary found itself in, explaining why he didn't oppose the Germans. A nation should not be forced onto the path of suicide, only faintly hopeful that it may rise again in the distant future. It was Teleki's self-sacrifice, however, that helped the British understand Hungary's dire situation. As a result, they abandoned earlier threats of declaring war on Hungary. The war against the Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, Hitler's Nazi Germany attacked Stalin's Communist Soviet Union. Hungarian military leaders admired the success of Hitler's army, and the Chief of Staff, Henrik Werth, tried to convince Horthy that Hungary should join the German-Russian war. He argued in favor of military intervention, stating that Hungary's adversaries, Romania and Slovakia, were already involved in the conflict alongside Italy and Finland, and could thus hope to reap the rewards if Germany prevailed. The government's delay ended when, on June 26, 1941, an unidentified aircraft launched an air raid on the town of Kosha. To this day, who carried out the bombing and why remains a mystery. The most likely scenario is of Soviet planes carrying out the attack by mistake or as a provocation. Horthy, believing the Soviets responsible, ordered an immediate retaliatory strike, in part from pressure by the military leadership and in part from his own outrage and anti-communist sentiments. At the same time, he instructed Bardoshi's government to declare that a state of war now existed between Hungary and the Soviet Union. The regent could not envision that the US would abandon its neutrality and, together with the UK, would align with Stalin, who was already known by the Allies to be a mass murderer, leading a bloody dictatorship. Horthy's assumptions proved wrong when, in 1941, the UK declared war on Hungary despite not having been in a state of war with it previously. Thus, in December, when called upon by Germany, Hungary was compelled to declare war on the United States. For a long time, the Treaty of Trianon curtailed Hungary's military development by limiting the number of soldiers allowed in the army. It was only in 1938 that this mandate was lifted, leaving Hungary just a few years to try and rebuild. Despite intensive efforts by the country's arms industry, Hungary remained significantly behind Germany and the Soviet Union in both the quantity and quality of its weaponry. Initially, Hungary kept its military involvement at a modest level. However, as the Germans encountered mounting challenges on the Eastern Front, they placed increasing pressure on Hungary to play a more substantial role. Ultimately, the government had no option but to deploy the entire Hungarian Second Army of around 200,000 soldiers to the front lines. The Second Army, led by General Gustav Jány, entered combat in late June 1942. The combined German-Hungarian forces broke through the Soviet front along a 300-kilometer stretch and advanced 150 kilometers to the Don River. The Soviets managed to establish several bridgeheads in the defensible bends of the Don, which Hungarian forces tried to capture. Bloody battles ensued throughout August and September, with heavy casualties. Hungary's only success was at the bridgeheads of Storosevoye and Korotoyak. By the fall, the Hungarian Second Army was under Imperial German command, sandwiched between the German Second and Italian Eighth Armies. German command assigned the Hungarian forces an unrealistically long front of about 200 kilometers, making it impossible for them to build a layered defense. On January the 12th, the Red Army launched an attack from the bridgeheads of Uriv and on the 14th from Shusha. The Soviet infantry had a 2- to 3-fold advantage, with artillery nearly 10 times more powerful than that of the Hungarians, modern tanks, advanced Russian firearms, and a notable difference in the quality of winter clothing. With massive losses, the Hungarian units could only hold their positions for a few days. Besides enemy fire, the bitter cold took a heavy toll. At night, temperatures dropped to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, where wounded soldiers could freeze to death within 15 minutes. However, the Soviets' rapid breakthrough didn't spell complete success for the Red Army. The defenders of Ostrogozhsk held the city for several days, allowing a sizable portion of Hungarian units to break out of the encirclement. It was thanks to the Hungarian Third Corps' self-sacrifice in the north that the German Second Army managed to break out. Hungarian losses were immense, with 42,000 dead or missing, 28,000 wounded, and 26,000 taken prisoner by the Soviets. The German occupation of Hungary. Severe defeat and Germany's significant failures sparked Hungary's political leadership to seriously reassess the situation. By this point, Horthy had appointed Miklós Károly, seen as a friend of the British, to lead the government. Outwardly, Károly gave speeches on wartime endurance. Behind the scenes, however, he began exploring possible exit strategies from the war. He contacted the Western great powers and secretly entered preliminary ceasefire agreements, hoping that the British and Americans would land in the Balkan Peninsula, reaching Hungary before the feared Soviet Union. Unfortunately, Hitler was aware of Hungary's covert peace efforts. On March 15, 1944, he summoned Horthy to a meeting in Klesheim, Austria. On March 19, taking advantage of the regent's absence, German troops occupied Hungary. Due to Germany's overwhelming military strength and the significant pro-German sympathy among the Hungarian military, they expected little resistance. The Gestapo, Germany's political police, arrived with them. They arrested countless members of parliament, including economic and political leaders. The Prime Minister, Miklós Károly, had to go into hiding. Over 100 newspapers, including the entire opposition press, were banned, and parties not aligned with German interests were dissolved. Most of Hungary's leadership was replaced with those loyal to the Germans. As collaborators, these leaders now headed the country, fully committed to serving Hitler's war efforts, hoping for a German victory, and offering Hungary's material and human resources to be at his disposal. The Holocaust. By the spring of 1944, mass deportations had already taken place in the neighboring countries, but not yet in Hungary. Thus, the largest Jewish community left in Europe lived there. From 1938 onwards, despite the Jewish population facing increased discrimination and infringement of their rights, and despite Hitler's 1943 demand to Horthy that Hungary solve the Jewish problem, the majority of Jews were able to hold on to their property and live in relative safety. That is, until the German occupation. After the German occupation, the collaborators within the new Hungarian leadership carried out German orders with enthusiasm. Jews were gathered into ghettos and arranged for deportation. Within a few short months, nearly the entire Jewish population of the countryside, around 437,000 people, were deported to concentration camps in Germany, primarily Auschwitz. Hungarians' reactions were diverse and complex. Many, influenced by years of ongoing anti-Semitic propaganda or driven by sheer opportunism, supported anti-Jewish measures. Others dared not speak out of fear of retaliation against themselves and their families, whilst the apathetic simply observed the events. There were those who tried to save the lives of their fellow Jewish citizens, at great risk to themselves. In July 1944, after months of inaction, Regent Horthy finally intervened. He commanded the armored division of Esztergom to Budapest with orders to prevent the deportation of over 200,000 Jews from the capital. The destruction of the country. After the German occupation, Hungary would know firsthand the horrors of the war. Allied bombing raids were launched over Hungarian cities, and troops that had until then been kept back were mobilized into battle. After Romania switched sides in August, allying with the Soviets, Hungary's line of fortifications along the Carpathian Mountains was simply bypassed by the attacking Soviet forces from the south. Miklós Horthy was determined to reach a ceasefire with the Soviets. He accepted the harsh terms imposed by them, and on October 15, 1944, made a public announcement over the radio. The Germans had other ideas, however, and to prevent Hungary from negotiating an armistice with the Allies, acted swiftly to arrest Horthy and install in his place Ferenc Szálasi, leader of Hungary's Nazi party, the Arrow Cross. Szálasi's use of power driven by foreign interests prolonged the country's wartime suffering. The Arrow Cross party ruthlessly persecuted anyone who dared resist them, including those remaining Jews in the capital. One of the memorials in Budapest, which displays shoes placed along the embankment on the city's Pest side, pays tribute to more than 2,000 people who were shot into the Danube. From September 1944 to April 1945, Hungary became one of the main fronts of the war. Hitler was determined to hold on to it, as by then only the oil fields in Hungary's Zola County remained to supply the Imperial Army's fuel. By late October, the Soviet military had reached the outskirts of the capital, setting the stage for one of the largest sieges of World War II, the Siege of Budapest. The city became the focal point for two of the 20th century's most ruthless dictators. Marshal Malinowski asked to be given a week to capture the Hungarian capital, but Stalin considered this too long. He ordered an immediate attack, hoping for a 2 or 3 day victory, saying, "It doesn't matter at what cost, at all costs." In actuality, it took 100 days to capture Budapest. Hitler declared it Fortress Budapest, with German and Hungarian troops defending it to the last. Several thousand soldiers and civilians perished in the desperate struggle. Hunger, disease, and terror took a devastating toll on the civilian population of Budapest, while artillery fire destroyed entire city districts. Although Stalin had ordered the destruction of the Danube bridges, Hitler beat him to it, even though by then the Germans knew the war was all but lost. By April 1945, Soviet troops had occupied all of Hungary. Soldiers of the Red Army behaved like ruthless conquerors, raping tens of thousands of women and transporting over 600,000 Hungarian soldiers and civilians to Siberian labor camps, of whom 1/3 perished in appalling conditions. By May, the war had come to an end, but while Western Europe saw peace as liberation from Nazi dictatorship, Hungary and its neighboring countries faced a new form of subjugation, one occupying power replaced by another. For Hungarians, this was compounded by another blow. After the war, both Vienna Awards were nulled by the Paris Peace Treaties of 1947, and Hungary had to return the territories it previously gained back. Thus, those ethnic Hungarians, once again trapped beyond Hungary's borders, faced deprivation of their rights, ethnic cleansing, and bloody reprisals from those neighboring states to whom they were returned.